Yeah, had a big introduction planned, but a lot of familiar faces. So yeah, my name is Sam. For those who are watching at home in their leisure time, I'm the mentoring officer for Charles Sturt. Before we get too much into it, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're all meeting from today. I'm in Bathurst on Wiradjuri land, and would encourage you in the chat just to pop your name and where you're coming from as well. Acknowledging these places have always been places of teaching and learning and community, and they will continue to be. So I did my usual sort of conference preparation plan, in which a few nights ago, I went and I looked at the abstract and what I said I was going to talk about, and figured that the name student mentoring looked quite sort of boring. So I was trying to figure out some sort of interesting way of presenting this. The first idea I had was to do a who wants to build a peer mentoring program. And I was going to set it up with like quizzes and like multiple choice. But that didn't quite work. And also it sounded a bit strange, like, oh, who wants to build a peer mentoring program? The second idea I came up with was, so you think you can build a peer mentoring program, but that even sounded more condescending. So you think, and I do want to apologize for my pop culture references. I'm in this weird sort of generational rift where I stopped watching TV as a teenager, but I also wasn't hip enough when Instagram came around. So I'm kind of stuck in 2007 and saying stuff like, oh man, this Kanye West guy's onto something. So I apologize in advance for any references I may or may not make. So in lieu of some sort of crazy name or gimmick, I figured we could just open this really up. And I'd encourage you to, if you feel comfortable, pop your video on. We've got a small group, so take yourself off mute, call out. I've had multiple people in this group already promise that they're going to heckle me, throw a pen at the camera. Thank you, Kath. Whatever works. More than happy to take sort of tangents on this one. Fantastic. So in that spirit of trying to keep things a little more interactive and interesting, you know, it'd be super easy to start this session with the defining, you know, the classic sort of second grade speech of, you know, the Macquarie Dictionary defines mentoring as, you know, senior person providing junior person with advice and support and guidance over a period of time. But it is such a personal experience. So I'd like, if you're able to hop into the chat and just share a quick sort of thought, images, flashes. What does mentoring mean to you? And particularly with the idea of what does mentoring look like to you when it's at its best? Brilliant. So we've got human connection, making connections that last, safe guidance, someone to bounce ideas off, another one. Nurturing, I love that. Love that. It's such a sort of depth and grounding of that. Joanne's just put in mentoring's at its best when a person challenges you so you can achieve personal growth and an aha moment. Yeah, I love that light bulb moment. Leaning on the life experience of others, shortcuts, yeah, knowing where people have made mistakes before, and a safe space, sorry, to ask tricky questions. I really love all those examples that are coming up. The flip side of that, what does mentoring look like to you at its worst? Yep, we've got control, dictatorship. Christine, you've just put silence in. And I do appreciate the irony of you having your camera and your mic off. Tell me about that.
Oh, I just say a mentoring-mentee relationship doesn't work if you don't communicate. Like if you lose that connection, if you like.
Yeah. And what do you often, I mean, in your experience, what have you found underlies that silence? Like what causes that?
Probably a disconnect in who the relationship is with, or not understanding, one person not understanding the questions the other person wants to have answered during the process.
So that lack of sort of shared concept and direction.
Yeah, so, I mean, sometimes mentoring programs, you're assigned to a mentor or a mentee, and I don't necessarily think that works. I think you have to have a way to connect to make the relationship work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that.
Of the connection, yeah.
I think Simon Sinek said something around that. It's just like, it's like walking up to a complete stranger and saying, "Will you be my friend?" Like, there's got to be a bit of background work behind it, which is always the challenge with exactly what Sam's doing. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I really love that connection piece and the work that goes into that. And there was one, Christine, you also said that creating that safe space, and we find that psychological safety is a really important part of being able to share and being able to express needs and come to that shared understanding. There's a bit more in there about sort of looking inauthentic, judgmental power differentials. And that's absolutely the case as well. What I really love is the sort of variety of arguments that we've got for good and or bad mentoring. Kathy's just put in not coaching, absolutely. So I love the sort of different things and the different angles that we're coming to it from. And mentoring really can be used to achieve many different purposes. So we had a masterclass training for mentors on Wednesday night, and our speaker who came in split it into 5 different categories that mentees would go to mentoring to get out of it. So stuff around skills and mindsets, knowledge as goal setting, support, reflection. There's a range of different outcomes that you can get. So if, there's only 7 of us in this room at the moment. If we're all looking for slightly different things, then we can assume that our students are going to look for something different as well. And the key for us in mentoring now is to be able to create those sort of strong connections and a strong process that supports our students to achieve those goals and also gives voice to those different needs. Now, how we do that in mentoring is we take you through a very, very fancy 7 or 9, depending on how you like recounting stages, 7-page planning and process model. So my job as mentoring officer, partner with you and guide you through this entire process. Today, I just want to cover very, very briefly these first couple. And because it's a Friday, let's include a bit of celebration of some kind anyway. So the first step in our mentoring process is to identify champions. Now, I've been quite lucky. Our champions are our early adopters, and they shape and drive our mentoring programs. It's our job to engage champions early, support them, build their capacity, build their knowledge throughout the program lifespan. We identify 3 broad groups of champions. So the first being leadership sponsors, who are key for long-term sustainability. I have been very lucky that I've got some leadership who are really backing our mentoring programs in, and also might have a go at me after this session if I say anything negative about them. I really hope the recording's capturing your face, Kirsty. Our second one is our staff, our academic and professional staff. So middle managers particularly, who have that proximity to both the operational and the strategic level, have amazing perspectives and insights and are able to see both the student experience and those sort of big picture organizational processes that are going on, and are able to identify opportunities. And that's often the sort of people we work with in building programs. And the last one is student partnership. So including students in a really authentic way, not just at the point of connecting them, but also earlier on when we're defining our context and purpose and designing programs and evaluation processes. That has positive impacts for mentoring effectiveness, engagement, student success the entire way down. So key is to get these sort of key champions as part of the team very early on. We've already done that today. We've got a bunch of champions already who put their hand up. Some of us were sneaky and turned our video off just before I hit this screen grab. So well done, Christine. The main thing I really want to hit on today is building a really strong conceptual understanding of why we're implementing a mentoring program. Kathy made a really good point before, mentioned Simon Sinek. I was a skeptic and now I'm converted with Simon. But we really need that strong understanding of why we're implementing something. What is mentoring? What's the educational context that grounds the program in the student experience? So that first piece, context. So this happens on multiple levels. What's going on in the surroundings? What's the need that we've noticed in our environment? So it could be funding. My job exists because the federal government decided that certain students' retention and success needed to be supported. It could be internal to the organization. So student retention ran a session yesterday where they showed that our low SES and regional and remote students were actually doing okay, which, you know, their success is funded by the government. But our First Nations students, particularly our online students, their outcomes are not as good. And that's definitely an area where a little bit of extra support can work. And you best believe I was talking to our First Nations team and figuring out how we can better support our students after that session. Can also be personal. There is a reason I moved down to Bathurst to take a job here and not just put my feet up in sunny Brisbane, where the winter it gets down to 18 degrees. The second thing is looking at purpose. So what are our program aims? What is our program targeting? Particularly looking at, what are the key students that we're targeting? How inclusive is the program? And what's our approach to student needs? Are we meeting them at a particular point in time or responding to evolving needs? The questions here I really want to introduce, and this is the real crux of the session, is how do we frame our context and who gets to decide our purpose? Because if we have a good understanding of this and a really grounded understanding of our context and our purpose, everything else follows, right? All of the decisions afterwards are made really easy because we understand why we're doing things. Now, I come from a policy background, so I might nerd out at some point. When we're debating any sort of policy, we invoke certain, let's call them orders of worth. So they're ideas of what has value to sort of justify or denounce a policy's legitimacy. So we'll make an argument and there's certain language we'll use that will suggest what we value as a person. When we invoke one order of worth over another to provide reasoning for a policy, we are privileging corresponding tests of worth, types of evidence, valued human qualities. So Boltanski and Thevenot have this model called the Orders of Worth framework, and they use it to categorize these arguments that we make. So they break it up into these sort of broad groups. So, inspired, domestic, civic, opinion, which is also called fame, market, arguments, and industrial. Particular ideas of what has worth, particular ways in which information is presented, relational sort of concepts, and then what we value in people. Just jumping off of mute, if we were to go on like a group of 8 sandstone fancy pants university and look at their peer programs pages, which orders do you think they would invoke? Christine, fire.
Oh, renown,
Yep.
trust, passion, or maybe not passion, actually, solidarity and recognition.
Solidarity. So they'd be using that sort of that opinion / fame sort of
Yep.
argument.
Yeah.
Yep. And you said a little bit of the sort of civic.
Yeah.
And maybe the inspired, but the passion.
Yeah, well, I reneged on that afterwards.
Okay.
Bearing in mind, I come from one of those sandstone universities, so not a peer mentoring program within it, but it's like just thinking about my experience at that sort of an institution. It's much more about who we are and what we can do for you.
Yeah.
Less about the, I guess, social aspect, if you like, even though that exists.
Yeah, so a little bit of the social and the civic, a lot of the opinion. Joanne's just put in the chat inspired as well. Okay. If we were to look at the peer program page for a regional university, what arguments do we think they would be making?
I have to say, kind of probably for the big sandstone, I'd tend to go with those, I guess, under the thing of domestic and that esteemed, trust, authority, reputation, we are amazing. And for our regional universities, I would tend to kind of go a little bit more inspired and potentially even that industrial because of that professional competency, expertise, that functional kind of area.
Yeah, absolutely. Joanne's just put inspired in again. So I did this, I did a scan of the peer program pages for all the Australian universities. The trends were that our those big picture sandstone, not big picture, but those sandstone sort of universities tended to use that opinion or fame argument. So as becoming part of a peer program, you're joining a community, you're tapping into the expertise of 800 years of university alumni and becoming part of a certain club. Regional universities are more likely to use the civic sort of argument, so join a community, right? Far more grounded. Predominantly though, and this is consistent across all Australian unis, it's actually market arguments. And Claire Mackin actually touched on this in the opening keynote. Post Dawkins reviews in the late 80s, the Australian education system's become increasingly neoliberal, and we often make arguments in terms of, okay, here's what you can get out of uni. You're a consumer, you're getting value for money, you put money in and you get a job out. Now, we are guilty of this. I wrote this, by the way. I'm going to fess up to it. A lot of employability talk there. Now, the important thing to note is that no order of worth is inherently more virtuous. Okay, there's nothing inherently better about making a civic argument over a market or an industrial argument. Jobs are important. But because language frames thought and what gets measured gets done, the way that we frame our context and we frame our purpose ends up narrowing what we consider a successful program and the range of students that we're able to successfully support. So what we're about to do, and how are we doing time-wise, Brett? terrible with maths. That happened to.
No, you look pretty good. We've got 25 minutes left.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. So what we're about to do, I'll break us into 2 breakout rooms. Now, before I do, as an individual, I would like you to look at this table and pick an order of worth that you would not otherwise ever use. All right, feel free to get zany. Those sort of Gordon Geckos in the room, go ahead and pick the civic order of worth. If you are Marxist secretly in your spare time, pick a market argument. I'm gonna give you a moment to pick on and tell us. Maybe give me a thumbs up when you've got something. So
sorry, Sam, we're just choosing one we wouldn't generally go with.
Wouldn't usually use, yeah.
And in terms of joining a community, is that the context of what you're talking about?
So the context I'm talking about is in your professional life.
In our professional lives, okay.
Yeah. And the reason I say in professional life is because in a moment I'm going to put you into breakout rooms.
Yeah.
As a group, I'd like you to quickly pick a context. So what's a student need you've noticed? Are there skills gaps or employability or retention rates lagging in a certain cohort of students? Any sort of area where you think students might need a little extra support. Once you've done that as a group, using your newfound language values test of worth, I'd like you to have a little discussion and make the argument for your new program from that perspective. So how would mentoring be successful when viewed from that angle? Particular sort of attention going to like how it would feel when it's going well. I've had in activities like that, people adopt a whole new persona. Please feel free to get into character. I grew up with family members in musical theatre. There's nothing you can do that would weird me out. Within reason.
Challenge accepted.
Challenge accepted, brilliant. Okay, I will be perfectly honest, my old man is 6'3" and upwards of 100 kilos, and he played the mum in Hairspray. So there's your bar to jump over.
Challenge declined.
That's does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're following. So I'm going to pop us into breakout rooms. 5 minutes to pick a context as a group, and then using your new orders of worth, have the discussion. What would a valuable, worthwhile mentoring program look like in that context? All right. And there we go. See you in 5. Let's see what they come up with. You are on mute. Are you trying to talk to me?
Sorry, Sam. Yeah, I said I'm still trying to get my head around them a little bit as well. I think, well, market and industry, I think they're very kind of straightforward. And civic, I don't really understand opinion. Actually, when you said that, I actually wrote down opinion, but I'm still not exactly sure about that one?
About what it means?
Yeah.
So it's the other word for it. I prefer the word fame.
Fame. Okay.
Yeah, it's more about the a place like Harvard or Oxford would use fame arguments a lot.
Mm.
Some of the ambiguity around this as well is quite deliberate. I didn't want to set things out too explicitly because mistakes are quite useful.
Yeah. Look, I don't like it because it's just, to me, there's not much substance to it. It's, oh, you were Harvard, we're fantastic. Well, yeah, but what are you doing that makes you fantastic? You know what? You're just going with a name, like you're just relying on that. Or I think when you think of something vacuous like the Kardashians or something, who are famous for being famous, but nothing, was substantive there.
I mean, there's also something to be said for you're joining into an institution, you're putting on the footy jumper, and we are a club that prides ourselves on rocking up to training early, and we, pride ourselves on physical fitness, or we're the sort of place where like we solve the world's big problems. You're buying into that culture of adventure and success, and we don't stop short of that. Like there's something to be said for that.
Oh, look, yes. I suppose if you can see the substance behind that, I suppose if you if you can kind of justify it, then sure, that's a good thing. But I suppose you've got to have the runs on the board, so to speak.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But I'm not sure how CSU could kind of. I suppose there's always might be a little bit of that. Yeah. In terms of, I suppose you've got to find your niche, haven't you? You've got to find what you're good at and be able to kind of highlight that around that one.
Yeah, I mean, and particularly if you've got a student who's coming in and they respond really well to those kind of arguments, and they're looking for that.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah.
Like having a niche, having a particular program that really.
Yeah. So would you try and kind of cover as many of these as possible, or you just try and focus on one or two, or?
It's just a way of, and this is kind of coming up very briefly, we won't go too far into it, but it's just a way of challenging preconceptions.
Yeah.
Because and I might use this example in a bit. You saw on the webpage, we really privilege those market arguments.
Yeah.
And set up the programs so that they were increasing employability. And then during COVID, so many students completely ignored that part.
Okay.
But the social connection and the support because of COVID ended up making it incredibly worthwhile for those students.
Wow, okay.
So they were really tapping into this sort of community and collective.
Yeah. And without COVID, you think that emphasis wouldn't have been there?
I think it would have been there. I just don't think as strongly.
That's strong.
Yeah. Or maybe it wouldn't have been expressed as strongly.
Yeah, certainly. And I think CSU, because CSU's got a bit of that wider support network, and because of online, I think it probably put them in a slightly better position than perhaps some other universities.
Yeah, it's a lot smoother transition.
Yeah. Particularly having that. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just saying, coming from a more in-person university before this.
Oh, sorry, where'd you come from again?
QUT.
Oh, QUT, okay. Yeah. I was just talking to someone from there the other day. I was talking to a few different universities about their peer review programs for teaching, because Denise got me to do a lit review on peer review on what we're doing. So,
who did you talk to?
Oh gosh, what's the name? I could tell you the name. Top of my head. Just looking all my.
Oh, they're coming back. I'll ask you afterwards.
Okay.
I'd be curious to hear. All right, we're coming back. How did we go? Oh.
So, I guess I went to Inspired because this has been a really interesting task, because I went to Inspired because they're sort of my values. That's why I think would be fantastic for a mentoring relationship, is that personal growth, like I mentioned, and that passion and creativity and the emotional connection. So that's why I went there. And the ones that least resonated were industrial and market. I was actually a mentor in a program similar to this one at USQ as a student.
Yeah.
And I must admit, I actually went for somebody that could connect me, who was high up in the industry that I was. So I probably went more sort of market or industrial or in opinion. So they're the ones that resonate with me the least, but I went with somebody that could make me grow, but also introduce me to her connections, because she's actually the president of a really large group of people that was part of the what I was studying.
So, sorry, Joanne, can I clarify? So your natural style was to go with Inspired, is that correct?
Yes, that was my natural style. And as I said, I've been doing a lot of also desktop audits around people strategy at the moment, because I'm looking at our EVP, employee value proposition. And as I was saying, I found some stuff like at Griffith University, we believe in the remarkable. So that was my natural style.
And how did you find the process of trying to make that argument that wasn't in your natural style?
Yeah, really not as comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And what we find often too is that when Christine was talking, that was the wrong thing. Christine was talking about the direction and the shared understanding between mentor and mentee. When we're not consciously thinking about what we're aiming for in a mentoring relationship, we will tend to default to our natural styles. And that mismatch often can lead to those sort of negative experiences. So if you arrived really wanting to really coming to a mentoring relationship with that inspired sort of framework in your head, just implicitly, but your mentor came in with okay, I'm going to help Joanne get a job, and you never had that discussion, that's where that mismatch happens, and that's when those negative experiences tend to happen.
That actually kind of explains, I think, kind of the argument or the discussion we were kind of having in that inspired is really nice. That's lovely, and it is feel good. But if I'm investing my time in something specific, I want outcomes. And for me, so I kind of defaulted back to that very industrial kind of, for me, it wasn't so much price and money and exchange and whatever. To me, that's just straight out marketing. But the idea of productivity, something that's measurable, that's something that's functional, professional competency, that's kind of what I would be looking for. So that's the crux of what I'm after. But if I can have that in a package that is somewhat inspired, that is delivered with some, compassion and some empathy and creativity, that's lovely. But the crux of what I'm after is something I think falls much more into that industrial, but if it's delivered in an inspired way, that is, yeah. But I think that also, that very much comes to my values as well, in even when I'm teaching, like you're teaching, you're trying to get across something that's very fun, like you're trying to get across key knowledge. And you can do it by just throwing the paper in front of them and go, there, read it. Or you can take it from a much more inspired point of view and lead them through it. And so they still get all of the outcomes that are productive and measurable and functional, but it can still be delivered in that kind of a way that is, that more inspired kind of perspective. But things like opinion, to me, that's not a mentoring program. That's a sorry, Brett and Sam, that's like boys club. That's not a mentoring program. That's a boys. That's a different kind of thing. Or Yeah.
At its worst, absolutely.
Yeah, and civic kind of feels a bit like I'm going to sign up to go and be a, you know, local on the local council or something. I don't know. Some of those kind of felt a little bit not natural in terms of mentoring.
Yeah. So I'm gonna challenge you on that one, but first I wanted to go to the other group. What arguments did
Thanks,
you what arguments did you make? So, was it Louisa, Kirsty, and Christine in that one? No? Who was in what group? I'm getting mixed up.
Louisa and I were together.
You and
I was
Louisa.
with Kirsty and Christine.
Okay, so we've heard from both groups.
Yeah.
The three we haven't heard from, did you want to add anything? No, we're good? Okay. Brett and I actually had a conversation about this because we had the same debate that you just mentioned, Kathy, around that civic and opinion. So opinion is that sort of that fame argument. And at its worst, yeah, absolutely boys club. And when it's done to the exclusion of all others, it looks like that. It can also take the form of going to a place like a Harvard or an Oxford would make this argument. You are coming here, you are tapping into hundreds of years of expertise and process and community. We are the sort of place where you come here to change the world. You know? And you're tapping into that, you're making use of that. So that can be used to achieve great ends. And I showed the web page before. This is to do with the civic. I showed our web page before how we were making a lot of market-based arguments. With the crazy year we've had, we noticed about halfway through our Building Your Professional Profile program that was entirely employability skill focused, that about half, okay, I want to speak out of terms statistically, a great number of students took all of that market-based get a job stuff and went, actually, I don't need that right now. What I need is to tap into a community, or I need to give back to somebody who needs it. And it became, they remained engaged. They were still meeting up, but it was all around, okay, how do I get through to the next week? What's the support I can tap into? What are the support services around the university? So the real, yep, go on.
No, I was going to say, but does this just mean there are different groups for different groups? I mean, for me, this kind of comes back to marketing. There's always going to be, let's say, this, the whole idea of, really defining your market and understanding there are going to be people who want to sign up to mentoring because they want to be a part of a group. There are going to be people who want to sign up to this because they want outcomes. Does that mean instead of kind of, because I know initially we had that kind of progressive, like first year and second year and third year, that gets thrown out the window and we rejig it to people who want outcomes versus people who want communities, to people who want, something else.
Yeah. So that's the point we're getting to.
Sorry,
so,
I'll go back on mute.
No. Thank you very much. That's a great question. Leads into the next bit. For anybody who's watching's reference, Kath Finlay got the ball rolling with mentoring, and I'm building on her work. So I owe Kath a lot.
And doing an amazing job.
We'll spruik later. Anagnosopoulos and her colleagues argue that we need to create hierarchies of worth. So this is an exercise in perspective taking, going, what are the range of needs and range of ways our students could come to this program, the range of things that they could look for, different values, different ways that they would gain worth from it. So by embracing the coexistence of these multiple orders of worth, we get to reference a range of conceptions of what good mentoring looks like. We get to operationalize what that looks like, put in metrics that reflect that, and benefit a wider range of stakeholders. So, and I won't get too deep into this because this is a later discussion. But we look at it, we use a 3-step evaluation model to get this. So firstly, our descriptive data. So we look at, okay, who are the students that we need to reach and are they engaged? Very simply, we measure that. we look at the bigger picture, success, employability, retention that we are funded for. We want to see students doing well. But then that middle piece, okay, the range of different ways a student might get from where they are now to that bigger picture, we look at our program objectives. We look at what are those unique, contextually bound mechanisms of student success that lead to better outcomes, that lead to retention, that lead to however that student defines that success for themselves. So we look at general categories around, feeling like they belong, being able to access support service, skill development. But those three things will differ very, very differently depending on how that student sees value and what value they place in the mentoring program. The additional advantage of this this sort of view of evaluation design is that middle step helps link the two. So it strengthens the evaluation validity because, as we know, saying they were in a program so they graduated 4 years later is confounded by a number of variables, and it also establishes how the program impacts student success, really links the what and the why. And so we set objectives and metrics in this middle part that represent those multiple ways in which students will engage and will value it. And we can just, for example, we might make a civic argument. The community is better off if we support particular equity cohorts, let's say, at our step one. We support them to improve employability rates and progression. But the in-between, we might have a compassionate or an inspired way of providing that support. We might really focus on the innovative ways that we deliver new types of support. Students will engage in different roles in different ways depending on the conceptions of worth, which are all valued. And then after that, design choices will follow. So everything comes back to, okay, why are we doing this? What is the worth? What is the value? Really getting to the core of that. And that is something that the mentoring team will help walk you through and ask those questions and set that. So we've covered that. We can help with the rest of the process. We're coming up on time, but happy to hear questions if there are any sort of pressing.
I don't think there's any kind of specific other questions that have come up in the chat, but yeah, what else has anybody else got?
Sam, I could ask questions for the ages on this. I think my first question is, in terms of differentiating that market on the student need rather than their perception of need rather than our perception of need, how long do the programs go for, or can they do multiple at once? Can you be in a community, as in a program, because you want to be a part of that community and have that civic kind of need, but also be wanting to get outcomes at the same time and be in another one to just get outcomes?
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Length of time, is there any, because I know we're kind of tossing around at some stage how long these programs ran for. Can they be open-ended, or can they change depending, like civic and community could be ongoing, outcome-driven, focused or something?
I suppose it's important to note that no program will exclusively rely on one idea of worth. The idea is we get our champions in our room, in a room together. We debate, we have those different perspectives, and we make sure that they are represented in the program, in the really underlying things, because all those design decisions come afterwards. Things like the time frame will naturally spring forth from those discussions. So we've got an orientation, a uni foundations program. Mm-hmm. The entire concept of that is, let's get students through to census state, because if they get through to census state, they will get through the end of session, end of the year. They're more likely at each point to progress to the next stage and complete their studies. That's just a 5-week program. That's very, very targeted. We have other programs that go for 90 days. And we've got a HDR program, I think, that goes for a bit longer than that, because those students have evolving needs. They're far more, they grow and change far more, and the relationship there is far more, it needs a certain level of depth that maybe that Uni Foundations one doesn't need. Yeah. Louisa.
Would you be considering working with the Postgraduate Student Association on the higher level of mentoring? Because I think they might be interested.
I would be interested in working with whoever thinks that this is a good idea. Let's have that conversation.
Louisa, we're already working in the postgrad space, probably not through the club, but through the staff level.
Yeah, because it doesn't really matter what level students are at, they always need, you know, a certain amount of support and assistance or whatever, isn't it? Okay, well, we're at our end time. So are there any kind of really urgent last minute questions you need to ask, Sam?
The one thing I will say is this is the very sort of start of a discussion. And a discussion that, you know, we've been really lucky to have a student in the room today, but needs to happen with students present. So if you'd like to continue this conversation, please contact the mentoring team, which is me and a student actually. And we also run a weekly careers and skills hub newsletter staff update if you're interested in hearing about some of the stuff that's coming up in this space.
Can I have another little plug for you?
That was really great, Sam.
Yeah, it has been great. And just for those of you who are here, if you are, Brett, I know you're from one of the course sort of areas, but you know, if you are talking to anyone around these types of things, we do want to really work in that course space as well. So having this built into a course that we can connect students to each other, whether they're in the same, you know, part of the course, you know, they're all in second year and they're all thinking about things, or even then to connect our, you know, our commencing students with our continuing students and nurture them through, oh my goodness, I'm at uni, what does this actually mean? So if you can help us to sort of spread that word as well, that these programs exist, we're really wanting to work in a holistic way about how do we get that whole wraparound support happening, connecting students through here.
Yeah, well, Sam did mention some of the policing students, which I wasn't aware of. And that's an interesting thing, I think a very useful thing. So from my specific perspective anyway, at least. So I'll follow up on that for sure.
Excellent. I've got a meeting coming up with Nigel and sorry, having a mental blank, but
Steve?
yeah, Steve, yeah, we've got a meeting coming up soon on something else, but I can talk to them about it.
Oh, and I think it's important, yeah, with that links with the older students and newer students, and there's always been that thing as part of policing, that their first part of their session, their training, they do purely online now, and I think we've been kind of probably dropping people that we probably shouldn't be, so I think there's a lot of potential.
Yeah, definitely, and definitely connecting them up to that session too. Group as well who are on campus, or the, you know, the 3 to 5 ones.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll keep Sam busy too.
Excellent, love it.
Yeah.
Please do.
Okay, well, we'll better wrap up there. So thanks very much, Sam. That was great, and everybody has said that. We don't want to say too much because, you know, you'll get a swell head, but yeah, thanks very much for all this.
Too late.
For the mentoring, and make sure everybody, just fill in that feedback form. It's in the link there, and we'll see you all in the next session. Thanks very much.
Thank
Talk
you.
soon.